Thank you all for your service to our country. I think we're all in a debt of gratitude, especially at a most difficult time. You know, Admiral Mullen, I heard you say that the under-resourcing of our engagement in Afghanistan over the last 4 or 5 years has brought us to where we are today. So that to me means that our adventure in Iraq has created a set of circumstances where we have under-resourced our efforts in Afghanistan. Is that a fair comment?
As I indicated, I think in my previous comments, clearly the priority and the direction I had, both as chairman and as chief of a service, was to resource Iraq. And we were balancing deployments, balancing time at home, and we could not resource
So you couldn't
Afghanistan.
resource Iraq and resource Afghanistan as you needed to?
That's correct.
Now, I look at this July 2011 date, and I see it as clearly aspirational. And I think we need to be honest with the American people. Can any of you tell me that after July 11th that we won't have tens of thousands of troops years after that date?
I think that the President and we have been clear that July 2011 is the beginning of a process of drawing down in Afghanistan. That process will be based on the conditions on the ground. You know, the President is very, I think I can speak for him, and Secretary Clinton can correct me if I get it wrong. The President throughout this process was very concerned about an open-ended conflict, of just unending commitment of significant numbers of troops and dollars in this. And so I think that, you know, he has not put deadlines in terms of when our troops will all be out, but clearly he sees the July 2011, as I said in my opening statement, an inflection point where we begin to draw down those forces in Afghanistan, and with a view to transferring this responsibility to the Afghans over a period of probably 2 or 3 years.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate that, and you've reiterated it several times. Let me go back to my question. Can any of you tell this committee that, in fact, after July of 2011, we won't have tens of thousands of troops for years after that date?
Well, Senator, I can tell you what the intention is, and the intention is...
Madam Secretary, I don't want to hear what the intention is. I want to know, can you tell the committee that there won't be tens of thousands of troops after July of 2011 for years after that? It's unlikely, right? It's unlikely.
I can only answer the way that I am comfortable in giving you the best information available at the moment, and that is that there is a convergence of opinion between us and President Karzai in his second term. In his inaugural address, he said he wanted the responsibility and would be prepared for the responsibility within 3 years for Afghan control over many important parts of the country. Right now, about 60% of the country is not contested. And within 5 years, the Afghans would be responsible for their entire security. So that is his aspiration. It happens to be very much in line with what we want to see happen. There will be, starting in July 2011, troops withdrawn based on conditions. Sitting here today, I would believe that we will be able to start the transition as planned in 2011. We also know that there will be, probably for the foreseeable future, a drawdown and transfer out of combat troops, but a request for continuing logistical support for the Afghan security force. So, you know, that is the kind of target that we're aiming at.
Admiral Mullen, is it true that right now the Afghan army only has about 10,000 soldiers that can operate without us being alongside them?
It is a small percentage.
Yeah, so what we are talking about is a massive increase that we seek in the Afghan army, which presents a daunting obstacle considering the fact that finding sufficient literate recruits and reversing what is an abysmal retention rate is a huge challenge, something we haven't done in 8 years, we're going to do in 18 months. And a large national army also requires a strong and capable central government to command it, and clearly a permanent foreign subsidy. So when I hear these dates, I believe that they are as solid as quicksand, and at best aspirational. And I appreciate the aspiration, but the reality is, as someone who has to cast a vote for that money that will be coming forth, I can't tell the people of New Jersey or this country that we are doing that clearly on aspirations. I think we need to be a lot more honest about our assessments. You know, I see this is putting a lot of eggs in President Karzai, who has been there since 2001, first as a transitional president and then as an elected president. And what has he presided over? He's presided over massive corruption, where, you know, anywhere between 20 or 40% seems to be the going rate of skimming off of the taxpayers' money, where members of his family and members of certain ministers' families ultimately seem to do very well in business transactions. They travel to some of the best places in the world. They have bank accounts overseas, outside of Afghanistan. And we want to say that we're really going to condition them. I'd like to see us condition their travel and their bank accounts to make sure that we're not going to see the continued corruption. That's a serious effort to have some type of control and say that we're not having a blank check. You know, I look at President Karzai when he makes his speech about my brother Taliban. Well, maybe there will be a day of reconciliation, but first you've got to fight the Taliban before you get to the point of reconciliation, so that they understand that there is a need for reconciliation. And so it worries me that a lot of what we're putting our eggs in here is someone who doesn't even speak in the terms of fighting the enemy. And an Afghan police that is so rife with corruption and is cooperating with the Taliban. And then I look at the disadvantage of having Karzai there. If our national security is, as you've defined it, as creating stability and creating an opportunity for the Afghan government to ultimately have the space and the time to fulfill what is ultimately nation building, we still will have the security issue as a concern if Karzai doesn't perform 18 months from now. We still will have that security issue. So as you've defined our national security interests, whether Karzai performs or not, we will be stuck in that set of circumstances. And that's a real problem. I don't get a sense we have a clear civilian counterpart. Even General McChrystal says, who is my civilian counterpart? And do we really believe that 974 civilian personnel versus 100,000 troops is going to meet the civilian aspect of this? And finally, I get no sense that we have a Pakistan strategy. We have been talking about offering them a strategic relationship. They don't seem to want a strategic relationship. They want the money, they want the equipment, but at the end of the day, they don't want a relationship that costs them too much. And it seems to me the more we build up our troops in Afghanistan, the more reliant we become on the Pakistanis in a variety of ways. So I just don't get the sense at this point in time of a comprehensive policy that says that I should vote for billions of dollars more to send our sons and daughters in harm's way in a way that we will ultimately succeed in our national security goals. I hope I can be convinced before that vote comes. But as of right now, I'm not. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Do you want to convince him right now?
I'll wait and do that, Mr. Chairman. We'll bring in more reinforcements.